Welcome to Hack Talks, brought to you by the NetWitness Incident Response Team, your weekly dive into the hottest picks, the strangest twists, and you couldn't make this up moments in global cybersecurity. Every week, we break down what's happening out there, challenge a bit of conventional thinking, and of course, we crown this week's epic fail. My name's Gordon Dixon, your host based in Glasgow, Scotland. And as always, I'm joined by Stefano Macalia, the director based in Rome, Italy. Ciao, Stefano.
Ciao, Gordon. Ciao, everybody.
And James Sobel, Senior Manager in Merritt Island, Florida. Hi, James. Great to have you both here.
Good to be here, guys.
You will be assimilated.
Let's start with in the news. The stories that have grabbed our attention this week. There's been no shortage of eyebrow raisers. And Stefano, what's caught your eye this week?
Thank you, Gordon. Well, first story of the week, the thrilling saga of Chrome extensions that start live as innocent productivity tools, get a shiny feature badge, and then, after a quiet ownership change, this evolved into a full-fledged data hoovering parasites. Quick Lens and Shotbirds keep doing screenshots, studio-like visuals on the surface, but underneath, they were stripping security headers, polling C2 every 5 minutes, and pushing payloads that never even appear in the source code. In a very peculiar fashion, the real code only exists at the runtime, which is likely becoming like a sort of rude ghost. You never see it in the files. You only notice when the browser start asking you to open the CMD and then pass the PowerShell code in a one-liner after Chrome updates. It's an extension supply attack, and in a nutshell, you install an earnest tool, gets sold like a used towel and on a roadside market, and then the new owner quietly discovered and decided to take advantage of these things to implement malware in your systems. So, it's surely something to reflect about, because it's not that common for us to discuss this topic, and surely it caught my attention, because once the passage between the ownership was from one owner to the second one, the new owner inherited all the bells and whistles regarding the shiny, legitimate applications and extensions, but they decided to go for the wrong side of the house. So, James, what do you think about it?
Stefano, I have some concerns. I thought you raised some pretty interesting yellow flags when it comes to these browser extensions. The first one is, who pays attention to the provenance of these things, right? Who's looking at the developer constantly? You might look at the beginning. You might do a little work to understand where this extension came from, but you're not going to notice a shift in development later on, a new developer, a change in ownership. So I think that's really concerning. I also, maybe even more concerning, is how the attacker in this case stripped out all the security capabilities and then basically just created an attack, their own attack surface within within your laptop, in essence, within an organization, right? Pulling out the security features, kind of creating their own way to run this in real time, as you said, not on a device. It's not sitting on disk anywhere. That's a new and interesting way, novel way, I guess, check one for the bad guys for creating something.
They are usually very creative. That's the point. So,
and Stefano, you're our resident news hand this week, because our second story is something else that caught your eye. So tell us more about that as well.
Yeah, we are discussing about an APT actor that found a way to take advantage of a traditional file sharing application to have the chance to exfiltrate data. We are discussing about Silver Dragon, APT 41. They breach into the environments in a typical old-fashioned style, you know, exploitation techniques, LNKs, components to detonate executable. But once inside, they start to become typically very noisy, operating by including payloads with decryption, memory hijacking, process hijacking, all the sort of typical traditional set of elements. From that perspective, our security measure normally can act upon, but surely these guys are even surely sophisticated enough to bypass the traditional solution. But from the defender and from the defender point of view, it's basically, okay, we block suspicious domain, unusual ports, weird binaries, and that is pretty much what is needed. But when you think about the way they exfiltrate the data, this is not in our checkbox normally. They used to adopt Google Drive, and obviously that means some of the environments cannot really flag this traffic easily because it's encrypted, because it's going to Google, because it's typically allowed. So from that perspective, as usual, creativity from the attacker perspective pay dividends. And this is a pure example of that. We highlighted this occurrence in our investigations, and well, it's time to think about what to whitelist and what not regarding our corporate applications, and to whitelist the proper ones, avoiding to leverage on too common mechanism of file sharing. That is my personal opinion on that. James, what you think?
I think we're looking at a change here, right? I think, hey, this is the point. I hope the folks listening to us are getting that from the perspective you're kind of putting out here, which is, you know, some traditional attack mechanisms, and then the attacker getting creative about using corporate infrastructure. I mean, attackers have been living off the land for quite a while, right? That's been a very successful approach. And why, you know, you, Mr. Corporation, have gone through all this effort to collaborate and communicate. You've put all these networks in place. From the attacker's perspective, why not use those? Why create my own networks, my own capabilities, when Google is a global organization? They've got a great way to share files. It's secure, maybe not always private, but hey, I mean, you know, again, I guess this is, you know, ding number 2, point number 2 for the attackers this week. You know, novel, interesting, smart, and organizations are going to have to start to think differently about, you know, what do they allow? Do you allow crypto? Do you allow, you know, collaboration tools? And as we've learned, and you know, Gordon, you may want to weigh on this too, just the complexity of deploying cloud. It sounds easy, right? The idea is just a few clicks and you're up and running, but you know, checking the wrong box can have big impacts. So that's where my head's kind of circling around what you just talked about. It's some crazy stuff. Gordon, what do you think?
And I think that's what's interesting about both items that you brought to us this week, Stefano, is that this new way of, you know, infiltrating and attacking organizations and infrastructures. And I suppose my question would be, what's our advice to our colleagues, our fellow cybersecurity professionals? What do they need to be mindful of? What do they have to keep sort of top of the list each week, where thinking about not just protecting things and checking out things in the conventional way, how we were attacked a month ago or a year ago? What do we have to do to preempt what kind of attacks are coming in the future?
Well, from my perspective, the first thing is always to ensure that you have the full visibility and you can build situational awareness every time, which means that you need to operate on multiple layers on the company and in the cybersecurity posture. But also you need to leverage on your own capability to study and to improve your detection based on the comparison with the attacker's creativity. This is exactly the lesson learned from these two examples I brought on the table today. The first, who can potentially think that our extensions in the browser can be the vector for an attack? It's not normal to think about it. At least it's not normal back in the days. So now we need to consider this normal. The second is, when you consider the exfiltration strategies of an attacker, you normally think about, as anticipated, DNS tunneling, HTTPS tunneling from the proxy, from the browser, whatever. But typically, you don't think about legitimate application used for malicious intentions. So this is exactly what it is. So again, I think it's important that we keep the pace of the creativity of the attackers, and from that perspective, study, and continue to study. That's the point.
Yeah, there's nothing static, right? I think
Yes.
a lot of people want the silver bullet, and I've got my security program full of silver bullets, and I'm ready to go. And these two articles really bring up the fact that you have to have a dynamic capability. You're always gonna have to come up with the ability to face new attacks and a creative, criminal mindset. That's a little different from the standard business think, and it's what makes cybersecurity so exciting.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I guess our final piece of advice is to do what James, Stefano, and I do, which is go through various different news reports and items through the week and pick out the ones that we want to share on this podcast. So be your own in the news researcher, and so that way you can see these new ways of attacks and new developments that are happening. And of course, if you spot something that you would like to share with us, then feel free to drop it in the line at the bottom of the video.
Resistance is futile.
Now on to the moment of truth. This week's epic fail. This is where we look at a cyber blunder, a slip up, or a downright questionable decision, and we rate it on our epic fail scale from 0 to 10. 0 is basically a rounding error, mostly harmless, and 10 is the full what the FIM were you thinking. So let's break down today's contender. And James, what's this week's epic fail?
All right, so this is a case of an organization holding a lot of critical data for businesses and legal firms, and then they're just offering up a permission slip for attackers to come on in and grab that data. This is a case of LexisNexis, who was attacked this February. Unfortunately, the attacker using an unpatched race condition, the React 2 shell, no creds needed, an internet-facing application sitting out in AWS is just a prime target for these attackers. They tried extortion, that failed. They leaked some samples, and then they made a bunch of claims, right? So LexisNexis is saying, hey, there is a limited number of profiles that may have been breached here, and that no detailed customer information is taken. The attacker, on the other hand, is saying, almost 500,000 profiles to, 21,000 particular customers, half a terabyte in tables, all kinds of AWS secrets, some in plain text, it goes on. So, you don't have to believe the attacker 100%, but if even just a small portion of that is true, this is definitely a catastrophic failure on the part of the folks at LexisNexis, right? So what's the root of this failure? There was a patch, right? This is an unpatched vulnerability. This is a failure that's common to a lot of organizations, but someone holding this type of critical data probably should have been, more expedient about that. And then, honestly, it's as many Epic fails are. It's a compounding situation. Unpatched vulnerability that was well known, and then misconfigured cloud environments. Weren't we just talking about how difficult it is to properly secure cloud environments? This is some basic security tenets being ignored, and that's why I'm throwing this one out there as an epic fail. Stefano, what do you think?
Yeah, I am too used to these type of things, unfortunately. That's the point. Probably because I'm getting old. But surely it's something that is remarkable, as usual. And from the perspective of, let's say, the impact, it's surely impacting a lot. And from the other perspective, again, the question is that, from the perspective of the technical difficulty to achieve the control is pretty much simple. The exploitation techniques are available, readily available. The unpatched system was readily published and readily potentially accessible from whoever. So is cybersecurity 101, guys. Is nothing else than that. So for me, is a big epic fail, and the scales of 8 to 9, probably 8.5. This time I am kind of like intermediate between the two, right? Gordon, what do you think?
Yes, we need to have an editorial discussion about whether our mature state epic fail now has fractions and decimal points in, but maybe that's for another time. I think it's interesting hearing what you were both saying is that the fail didn't have to be a fail, and I think it's interesting to then see what makes it epic is the scale that fail leads to. And I really love that idea, James, that you introduced of it's not just one thing, although once you've let the barn door open, then a series of other failings, really does compromise your situation greatly. So I think that's what's interesting. If we hear about the sophistication in the stories you brought to us earlier in the episode, Stefano, about the new ways to get entangled and to be vulnerable, then leaving the door open or leaving something unpatched, not attending to the basics, to the things that can be fixed. If you leave that done, then you're open even more to what's going on. So yeah, I would tend to agree. So let's lock down our scores. I'm feeling generous, so we'll let Stefano with his 8.5 just for this week on a special occasion. I will stick to whole numbers, so I'm going to go 8. And James, what was the scale when you read this and brought this to us?
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I know about the landmines of the midpoint scoring here. So I'm just going to go 9 to keep it simple. I think this is high up on the scale. And for me, what pushes it to the 9 is the irony of this. This is a company used for risk management. That's what they help other companies do. And yet they were unable to apply those concepts to their own security systems in a way that prevented this. And that little irony tends to climb it up to 9 for me.
You convinced me, James. It's a 9 at this point. I forgot the backgrounds about this thing. So it's a 9 in full.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Gordon.
This week's epic fail score is 9.
Grazie, Stefano, because I was just thinking I was going to have to record an 8.5 epic fail scale.
No.
So we can leave that for another time. But yes, so I think that's a resounding 9 from us this week. Before we wrap, let's flip the mood with this week's mighty win, something generally uplifting from the cyber world, a moment of competence, cleverness, or just a rare feel-good story in a sometimes gloomy landscape. And this week, I'm going to bring something to you, gentlemen, that I spotted. So a large stolen data forum gets taken offline. So TechCrunch reports that law enforcement sees Leakbase's database, citing 142,000 members and a large archive of stolen credentials, financial data. Enforcement actions were taken worldwide. And what really is uplifting for me is it's hitting cybercrime at the distribution layer, the marketplace that makes other attacks easier to do. So for me, this seems to be a clear win and something that surely slows down, if not stops, the opportunity for further activity on cyber criminals' behalf. So, Stefano, what do we think of this particular mighty win?
Well, Gordon, to be honest with you, this one is a bittersweet mighty win, if I may, because from one side, surely an applause to the law enforcement agencies behind this takedown, because surely this community is including a lot of bad guys, and it's a market where cyber criminals auctions for accesses, for tools, for data. So from that perspective, you are totally right, Gordon. But there is a small caveat in this discourse, to be honest with you, as a security researcher. Some forums, some communities like this one that are significantly big, I mean, they count thousands of users, okay, recorded. When they are taken down, there is an important aspect that we need to consider that is not really into the newspapers, but is important. These forums, when they are big, they are normally monitored by not just the law enforcement agencies, but even from us, from researchers, okay? And sometimes these are the points into the internet where you can harvest, you can collect some moods, some tools, some details about the cyber criminal activities. When these big communities are taken down, normally it means that the cyber criminals especially will migrate to other smaller community that are not under our radar. They are beyond our control, and potentially they will stay, let's say, in these specific communities until these communities as well will grow more. So it takes months. So for months, we risk to not having a proper point of view about these communities. So again, I'm totally happy about the fact that we are impacting the overall, let's say, cyber criminal ecosystem, for sure. But the way this thing happened, to simply block the access to this community and potentially to investigate who is behind that, to bring it in jail, it's creating potentially some gaps into our visibility and our even threat intel analysis on the cyber criminal ecosystem, which potentially are impacting negatively on the cybersecurity overall. Again, we need to balance the things. Obviously, from one side, it's significant, the impact of this takedown from the perspective of the cyber criminal ecosystem in terms of economics. From the other perspective, however, that will surely make us a hard time to find proper information regarding a number of topics connected with the cyber criminals. That is my point of view. James, what do you think?
I'm listening to you gentlemen speak about this, running through. You can probably see it in my face. I'm hearing, or I'm remembering every crime movie that you've ever seen. I'm thinking The Departed, Miami Vice, whatever, where they're talking about going undercover and Gordon is saying, hey, we want to pull the team out and take them down. And Stefano was like, no, we're going deeper. We're gonna stay undercover and find this out. And I think it is certainly a win from the practical standpoint of just taking some capabilities out of the attackers tool set here. That's fabulous. But yeah, the nuance of this, and Stefano, thank you very much for kind of bringing that up. A lot of times I think we see this from the from the cybersecurity standpoint. You know, it's not always the simple things. It's not always just disconnect that device. It's not always the obvious answer. It does take some background and some thinking. So this is a great case to kind of bring up, you know, a positive and, you know, the nuance that's involved, and I think the challenge that law enforcement and defenders face in general. How do these groups collaborate? And when they do, they have amazing impacts. And when they can't, you know, we're going to see some positives and some negatives.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting point that you're both making, is that in a purely sort of cyber crime kind of sort of lens, then disrupting, you know, this market, this organization will reduce harm. You know, there is a short-term impact of creating chaos within that kind of sort of community and within that kind of forum. However, if we think about sort of cyber criminal intelligence, and both of you kind of sort of hinting at that, then actually you would want to keep that open the closer that we can observe what's coming, especially if we think about, you know, the news items that you brought to us at the start of the episode, Stefano. If things are getting more sophisticated, if the attack landscape is getting wider, if vulnerabilities are everywhere, then the greater amount of intelligence perhaps trumps or it betters the crackdown of, you know, criminal activity. So the difference between crime and intelligence, I think, is an interesting one we've brought up here. So any final thoughts from you, Stefano, on this particular topic?
Well, it's surely something that is good to discuss in the coming episodes of Hack Talks, for sure, because I think it's important also to bring to the attention to our audience what is connected with a certain type of actions. Surely, when we take down a C2 of a group, is obviously only generating positive effects. But when we are taking down a community which is built around, yes, cyber criminals, but also potentially visitors like us that can access and see what is going on, that is a point that can generate, let's say, not the same level of positive, let's say, outcome that is generated when we take down botnets or we take down potentially infrastructures directly leveraged upon by the cyber criminals to do attacks. In this case, we are discussing about the community. Surely not a good community, but surely also a community that is built around a number of elements. And sometimes you can even touch the mood of the cyber criminals on certain topics, which is important to understand to prevent further attacks on specific areas. So that is the point. But thank you very much to brought this on, Gordon.
You have been watching Hack Talks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great topic, Gordon.
Yeah. It's okay. We agreed beforehand that I would be the fall guy to introduce that particular topic. So just to reassure our viewers that they weren't ganging up on me. You know, I'm not going to stop the recording and start crying. It's fine. So a huge thanks. A huge thanks to Stefano and James for joining me, and thanks to you for tuning in. And this has been Hack Talks from NetWitness Incident Response. We'll see you next time. So it's goodbye from me, Gordon in Glasgow.
Ciao, guys from Rome.
And James
from Merritt Island. Take care.
Thanks again. Goodbye.